I am so tired. I could like turn on the I have retouch on, but I like the light foundation thing. But I decided I want a modicum of privacy, so to speak. Well, not really. I don't know. Enough privacy that it feels like I'm trying to have a little privacy. You know what I mean? Even if it's not a real thing. I don't make sense. My anxiety and pain levels mean like right now I'm just sort of off the idea of sleep. So, what I'm doing instead is I am responding. I'm making the first of a series of responses, possibly, to a Brittany Reacts video on YouTube. And if you don't know who Brittany Reacts is, go to YouTube, look her up, and follow her. She's amazing. But she's been talking about the how Hollywood got to where it is, and I agree with her. I just don't feel she started far back enough. And I am not an expert. I am a geek, and there are some things that I kind of remember, and because I'm not sleeping and because right now apparently my my mental state means that I get to choose between means choosing between doing this or fighting with people on Twitter. And I really try not to fight with people on Twitter when I have no filter, because very often I'm having battles of wits with unarmed folks. And so I try not to do that because, you know, it's I feel like a better person when I don't. So here's the thing. Hollywood is in fact in trouble, and Hollywood has in fact been in trouble for pretty much since its inception. When it started, it was, as I recall, it was the UK. It was Great Britain that was the leader of the film movement, and women featured very heavily in that. And I would imagine that if you are also working with women who are also directors and writers and tech personnel, etc., it affects how you treat them in the workplace a little bit. If you're like, you know, really expensive experimental thing needs them, you're gonna show up a little bit more respectful, I feel. Just my thought. But then the time came when Hollywood became a thing, and the studio system became a thing, and all of the power in the movie business became concentrated in a very small area and amongst a very few people. And they were able to create these fiefdoms where what they decided went. But fortunately, also many of them were still creatives. They were still filmmakers. They still believed in like art. They did a lot of crap that they should not be excused for. Do not get me wrong. But they still knew how to make art. And then not Madison Avenue, Wall Street got involved. Lots and lots of years went by, lots of things happened, including the advent of the casting couch and basically the sidelining of women in the filmmaking business. And now we have the casting couch, which also is bad for movie making. It's bad for good movies. If you start hiring people based on whether or not they're going to sleep with you, guess what? The work starts to suffer. So, you know, if you start abusing people sexually and then still expect them to show up for work properly, guess what? The work starts to suffer. So we were already in a slow decline when Wall Street took over, when these companies went public and decisions started mostly being made based on what was good for the stockholders and not what was good for the movie business as a whole or the art of making film. That's where we are, where we were. And the what I'm thinking of is a book by it's a Goldman. It's either John or James. I can't remember which one. I am sorry. It's the one that wrote The Princess Bride. It's the one that wrote The Princess Bride. The other, because I love both of them. One of them wrote The Princess Bride. The other wrote The Lion in Winter. And in addition to The Princess Bride, Goldman wrote a bunch of books about Hollywood. And one of the things that he talked about was how there was a time, when before Hollywood's completely sold out, but after all of the social upheaval, that meant that the men in charge no longer understood the tastes of their audiences. So everybody was chasing the Sound of Music audience, the audience that was willing to, the audience that went to that movie in droves from age 2 to age 60. Everybody wanted to see The Sound of Music. And they never really quite figured out how to catch that lightning in a bottle again, because again, the powers that be were out of step, out of touch with their audience. So that's part of it. And now, and what we've seen is sort of a slow devolution that has been a natural process of the business being sold to, accountants, basically, who don't know anything about art, who don't know anything about what it takes to create something that's good and beautiful and perfect and amazing, who use focus groups that aren't that very helpful, because the truth is that audiences don't know what they want until they see it. Until they sit in the theater and have the experience, they don't really know what they want. It requires experimentation. It requires risk. And, in the old days, in the studio system, they were still willing to take those risks, because just for the bragging rights alone of having made, Casablanca, or as much of a wild situation the making of that movie was, having the bragging rights for having made it was a big deal. And so was having the bragging rights for making a Ben-Hur or whatever. So they did, the lousy sort of, let's make money movies in order to pay for the risks they were willing to take for art. Now, what we have it's sort of a reverse proposition, where the goal is to make money, and you try to make a good movie in order to make more money. But because the people in charge have no idea what a good movie is, they have been running scared ever since. So that's that part. And then we get to the streaming services. Now remember, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna talk about the streaming services.